to what Mrs. Butler said. At the Regents level, there are, the tests are available afterwards and the questions are available to the 9 through 12 Regents exams, which is done a little bit differently from 3 through 8. So we are hopeful at some point that'll be able to change. The question I have is who grades these tests, and it is done a little bit differently. 3 through 8th grade tests are, currently our district has them regionally scored. The law mandates right now that the classroom teacher cannot score their own exams, or their own students in exams. For Regents examinations, the extended response questions are scored by 2 to 3 teachers that are certified in that instructional area, and again, it cannot be the teacher of record for the students. So in some districts, and it hasn't really been an issue for ours, we happen to be just about big enough, but in some districts that are in our local area, we sometimes send teachers to those schools to help them with some of their scoring during Regents Week. And all of the multiple choice on Regents examinations are scan scored, so teachers don't score them, they're sent to Regional Information Center in Binghamton, scan scored, and we get them back within an hour.
Thanks, Mike. And some of these questions are repeats, but there's a little bit of nuance, so I think I'll answer a couple of them. Under one question indicating who makes the test, I think we mentioned that the 3 through 8, currently Pearson has that contract. The Regents examinations, the state does make those, and teachers historically have been asked to go to Albany and work on those tests. I think one, also the NWEA is a non-profit testing consortium, and that's who make the NWEA test. They are a national non-for-profit. As far as the field tests are concerned, I think it's important to understand that that field tests are necessary to ensure the validity of the items within the test. While they do take time and they are somewhat intrusive with regard to taking up classroom instructional time, we can't have it both ways. If we want validity in the test, if we want to make sure that the items have been tried, then we have to put up a little bit of field testing. That has been the case with Regents exams for years. At one time, the state would come out with strands, which you would be able to kind of predict for a number of years which field test a school district was going to be asked to give, and we would like to see a return to that so that we could plan for it. The 3 through 8 tests have items embedded in them, which then obviously cannot be released if they're going to be utilized in a subsequent test.
In the elementary school, the field test we're taking this year is a science test. And the environment is a little bit different. It's an hour. So the kids get the test, take the test, hand it in, done.
I think since Ms. Gorman brought that up, there are 3 field tests at the high school level this year. One is in physics, 40 minutes done in a class period. The second one is Algebra 1, again 40 minutes done in a class period. The one that's a bit more intrusive and changes the day and schedule this year is the English Regents, which will take 2 hours, and that involves each student that's in our current junior class.
We're ready to move on to topic number 3, which is teacher evaluation. So again, in your groups, if you could take a minute to write down, 2 minutes actually, to write down what you know about teacher evaluation, and then we'll report out, and then we'll go on with the presentation and answer questions. All right.
What do you know about teacher evaluation?
Anyone else?
Somebody else. The New York State test, part of it, small part of it. That's funny. My son's going to kindergarten too. Nice. Yeah, as well. What do you know about teacher evaluation? Or, you know, depending, right now, you know, there's a lot it's good, if you
About 20 seconds left to wrap up your thoughts.
adversely affects the teacher.
We'll go around the table and ask for one comment or thought from each group. We're going to start with Jack. Comment in Jack
You want to comment?
All right, at that table, the table where Mrs. Butler is, we have a one thing you know, one comment. Give a comment.
Can I say something? Carolyn just mentioned it would be helpful, there's so much information right now, it would be helpful if we had something at each grade level, maybe even an open house, or sometime at the beginning of the year to make things clear about what happens in that grade, how it happens.
We actually talked about that up front, that this would be a good thing to do at the beginning of the year, so good point, yes, thank you. The next table, Mr. Colson's table.
Just a comment and question.
That we decided, or whatever, that the proposed teacher evaluation being 50% of the testing is not good.
The proposed increase of the percentage for,
Right.
based on testing,
Very
is 50%.
Very good.
Not something that is, Ms. Cable.
Well, I guess we had similar concerns with the new proposed teacher evaluation system. And would it be, or I guess would refusing to take the test or have your child take the test be a way to show the governor that we think that this is a really poor path he's going down?
So would refusing be a way to get the message to the governor that this isn't a good idea, a poor path? The front table? Okay.
Same question you said, why is teacher evaluation tied to the score?
Why is teacher evaluation tied to the
Our
score?
other question, very similar to yours, will the teachers be reprimanded or, will there be repercussions if they refuse to administer the test?
Will there be repercussions if the teacher refuses? Yeah, it's the law, we have to follow the laws.
Oh, that is no.
Yes, that's their job, that's the law.
We know that the time taken by the teachers to work on their binders and their evidence binders, etc., takes away time from the teacher.
Teacher work on evaluations, including the binders, takes away from this instructional time.
In addition to what has already been said, one thing we know from the Department of Education's website is in terms of repercussions for not meeting the 95% participation is it would take at least 6 years for repercussions to happen, that 3 years of not meeting the 95% would be required in order to become a local assistance plan school, and then an additional 3 years would be required to become a focus school. And Megan was saying that even schools that have gone through that process of 6 years have not had.
I'm not sure if it's the 6 years. We had a conversation about districts who have not met their AYP, who haven't had the 95%, and that there have been no repercussions as of yet.
So the comment was about what was called annual yearly progress and what happens to a district if you don't meet that, and one of the requirements is the 95% of the students participate in the assessments.
Ms. Table?
I think we mostly talked about, we understand that the evaluations, that these are state laws, these things come down from the state, and that the district doesn't have necessarily control over what the percentage of assessment is in teacher evaluation. But we want to know is how we can help our teachers, or what message we can send, and what we can do to help our teachers to fix some of these issues with the system.
Did everybody hear that?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll collect those papers.
This has come up several times tonight, talking about the governor's proposal for the APPR. And before we get started on kind of our history and what the current APPR is for Cooperstown, some of the news stories today that were coming out of Albany indicating that the Senate and the governor have already come to a tentative agreement to move the educational reform components out of his original proposal to a commission, or to a commission supposedly comprised of educators as well as state officials and others. And that's, I think, what many people have been advocating for all along. Will the Assembly follow suit with that? I'm sure we will hear in all likelihood in the next day or so. So I think that that's an important component to take into consideration. Now, Lynn, are you starting? I'll let you start with our history and perhaps a little bit more insight into what our current APPR is.
Actually, the APPR became a district mandate back in 2001. And when it first came out, it was more of a professional growth type model. Many districts used the Charlotte Danielson model or the Marzano model. And those rubrics really were not intended for an evaluation form that districts are now being asked to employ right now. It was more for professional growth and enhancement of student outcomes. In 2012, they took those good models and morphed them into a system that we are now realizing. Cooperstown really had a good faith effort. They had a large group of teachers working together to quickly implement something that was still sensitive to our students and, you know, understanding that we're dealing with people, as well as teachers. And, you know, I think they did a really good job putting together a plan that adhered to the state mandate. And, you know, we're really being very sensitive to all the assessments that students are asked to take on an annual basis. And, you know, that brings us fast forward to where we are right now and how there is a new committee looking at our current APPR. And, you know, Mr. Abear will give you a little bit more information of what we're trying to do to try to minimize the assessments that our students are being faced with on an annual basis.
Looking at the components, really, when we first, you know, obviously we had to follow the components and the tenets of Education Law 3012C, and that really specifies what, you know, how the APPR plan has to be laid out. Looking at the 60%, somebody had mentioned it before. This was a conversation with a group of folks. You know, initially our inquiry team, and eventually this was a negotiated item with the Faculty Association. The 60% includes the observation. One is, I'm talking about tenured teachers at this point. One is a announced observation. One is an unannounced observation. 20% of that is also a professional binder. And in the professional binder, our inquiry team assisted in coming up with examples of how teachers could essentially gather artifacts to exhibit some of the things that they have done over the course of the year. The requirements of the APPR law is that it be evaluated on all 7 teaching standards every year. There are several elements or substandards that are not necessarily required to be evaluated, but all 7 standards must be evaluated in some way over the course of this 100 points. We also decided on the NICET rubric, and again, that was a joint decision that we made, and we feel that, or felt at the time, that it was the most applicable and easily understandable, and that's what we have in place at the moment. The growth component for those teachers in grades 3 through 8 who receive a growth score, math and ELA teachers, that comes from the growth that is exhibited by their students on those state assessments. And for all other teachers, an SLO is developed, or student learning outcome. Essentially what we do, to give you the short version of that, there is a pre-assessment that's given in the fall. The principal and the teacher come to an agreement about what acceptable growth would be, given analysis of previous years and what the expectations would be for a unit of growth, or a 1-year unit of growth for students, and they set goals or benchmarks for that. And those are put into a spreadsheet, so to speak, that comes out with a value of 1 to 20. The local component is achievement, and again, that comes from a variety of different sources. Many of the elementary goals come from our third-party assessment, the NWEA, and how those results stack up against the rest of the country, or those who are in that consortium. And that makes up the 100 points of our current APPR plan. We have a committee working on a revision of our APPR. We feel that there are a number of areas where testing is a little excessive, and we would like to cut that down. We're looking at ways to collaborate and ways for buildings or grade levels to share perhaps both the growth and the achievement component of the score. We're also looking at other options as far as the professional binder. Somebody mentioned that perhaps that is intrusive on teacher time. It is incumbent upon everyone, again, again, as I mentioned, to meet or be evaluated on those 7 standards. And we have other options that have been discussed. Again, this is something that is under negotiation, but we are looking at the possibilities of goal setting and attainment options and rubrics, as well as other professional development and professional growth opportunities as well. We want to answer questions? Okay. I'll start since you handed me a half dozen or so. These are the easy questions. They're all related. They are all related. Okay. Let's see. Why are they given so many other assessments in grades 3 through 8, state tests proportionately 50% favored in the latest proposal? And again, I don't want to make a conjecture as to why the governor does what he does. If I were, I would think that perhaps it is a diversionary tactic, but again, that's just conjecture. I don't think that he has a very intimate understanding of the APPR process, perhaps, or what it would mean. Right now, when we look at the 3 through 8 tests, those teachers who receive a growth score, you're looking at the total percentage of teachers K through 12. We're probably talking 20%, maybe, I would think, of our total teachers actually receive a growth score from the state. So to move that from 20% to 50% only serves to heighten the disparity and the unfairness of the entire system. What we've, kind of looking back at the whole APPR, what we're trying to do is come up with something under a set of rules and a set of laws that is almost impossible to do. If I'm, a 4th grade teacher and I'm going to be evaluated on a standardized test and the score is going to come from the state, how then do I compare to my neighbor who is in 2nd grade who doesn't have that same test? And that's what we've tried to come up with, something that's going to provide some equity, some parity, and hopefully provide some validity for the entire system. I think we've done a decent job on our first draft of it. We're 2.5 years into it, and we would like to make some modifications to it. The distractions from Albany make that a little more difficult, but we will certainly press on. And does evaluation impact on teacher pay or tenure? Pay, I guess, not necessarily. As far as tenure, it could, yes. Teacher evaluation, whether it be the APPR, whether it be the APPR and the old system that we used before, teachers, like everyone else in the school district, are evaluated. And their performance is rated, with whatever system we're going to use. And tenure is granted to those individuals who are successful in that probationary period. And that's not going to change, regardless of what system of evaluation that we have. We would like to have a commonly agreed upon and fair evaluation system that we can have, and have it be transparent such that all players agree on the end result. And, obviously, if you're someone who does not receive tenure, you might not agree with that. But if everyone who understands the system does, then I think that the result will be much more palatable. How are tests or scores comparable class level to class level? PE, 1st grade, 7th grade, high school social studies. I think they're not at all, actually. And as far as the APPR process, we're trying to come up with ways that make it as comparable as possible. But each of these areas are different tests. They're testing different skills, and the expectations are different in there. As far as the growth component, the 3 through 8 is looking at 1 year's growth, or the expectation of 1 year's growth for a student as compared to all the students in New York State. It isn't necessarily setting a bar, but it wants to, there's a little there's a lot of misinformation around all of these things. But it's not that, the most capable students are going to be able to most easily demonstrate 1 year's growth, or that the weakest students are going to have the most difficult time. That's not necessarily the case. We're really looking at a year's growth when compared to a similar or comparable demographic. How can having our child refuse the test help our teacher? I don't see that it does. Teachers are, if your child's teacher is receiving a growth score, if he or she does not get 16 scores, then he or she won't receive a growth score and will have to revert to an SOO.
Just a quick question on
Yes.
that. The information that you sent us.
Yes.
On that, from the, I believe it was from BOCES, said that if the teacher teaches a math and an English, even if 5% fail out of both tests, you've still got 30 people. So you then can do your, you would be
You would still, yes.
So the way Ms. Butler was saying that they teach everything, I would assume you guys would be, you could be English and math and social studies. You could, you know what I'm saying? So even if 5% bailed out of your class, you still would have, because the way you guys are teaching, which I think is a nice, I mean, it worked out for my daughter, you know what I mean? So do you know what I'm trying to say? Could you guys be assessed on that? That you would be teaching?
Yes, there are two different, they're being made. The 95% is essentially for the district. If we don't, the 95%, if you don't make that, then you don't make your NYP. For the individual teacher, to obtain a growth score, they have to have 16 scores. So if I have 22 students in my class, and 6 or 5 opt out or refuse to take the test, then I would still get a growth score.
Right. But could she use it as, because like she was saying, she teaches math with English as a part of it.
Oh,
Can
right,
you
now I
use that?
understand what you're saying, okay.
I don't.
No, okay. So because we integrate the ELA standards all across the board, could the ELA scores count with my math scores? No, because I'm not the teacher of record for the ELA students. There are rosters that are assigned to each teacher. That's a great question. Rosters assigned to each teacher. So my rosters are for math students only. However, in 4th grade, their homeroom, they have a math roster and an ELA roster. So if they have 20 students in homeroom, they could potentially have 40 scores. Okay, good question.
And again, this is not to cast aspersions on anyone. These are individual decisions that people are making. The purpose of tonight is not really to debate the pros and cons of test refusal or not test refusal. It's to provide information. And these decisions are really yours to make as parents and with your child as to whether or not this is valid for him or her to enter into. Again, I think Mrs. Butler makes a good point. We are not in the business of a test prep factory here. We really are espousing a well-rounded curriculum for children. We want them to have a full and solid experience in school, and we think that by doing that they have nothing to worry about when it comes to assessment. I think it's also important to note that we utilize all of the data, whether we get it immediately, like NWEA, or whether we get it much later, when we would prefer to have it sooner, for our state assessments. And these are all individual data points that we use. Some perhaps have more value than others, but when we are considering, whether to, provide support or additional support or those types of things, we want to look at as many data points as we possibly can. Yeah.
For those students who achieve a 4 on the state test, 1 year they get a 99th percentile, and then the next year they get a 4 again, but they get in the 98th percentile. Is that then not considered a growth score, and is that score then counted